they're encouraging you to believe that what you are is not good enough. What you are born with, what you have, whatever it may be, is not enough, and you need to change physically to be worth something, when that's not true. We're in business today, and we're talking about something that's actually been quite heavily requested on the channel for probably about a year now, which is K-pop and arguably to an extent Asian beauty standards. We're going to look at Stephanie Lange's video where she spoke about K-pop body culture is the grossest thing I've seen in a long time. And I'm not going to repeat her points, I'm not going to copy what she's saying, I'm actually going to give my own perspective and try and say things that she maybe didn't mention to give just a slightly new look at things. If you are here and you actually do care, which you probably don't, but I'm running a raffle at the moment where if you buy any of the TFNL workout guides, which can be found on the TFNL website, tfnl.uk, you automatically get entered into a raffle to win one of three things. The first one is 2 months free online coaching with me. The second one is a free program written by me for your goals. And the third one is your order refunded. And if you happen to be part of the mailing list, which can be found at the bottom of the website, you might get a bit of a discount code to help you with your endeavors. Firstly, what is K-pop? So K-pop stands for Korean popular music, which is basically like a music genre or like a type of music which is very popular amongst that audience. It follows a very kind of universal aesthetic and design which kind of aligns with the whole K-pop culture. Just a quick one, if you're still here, don't forget to click the red button down below to subscribe to the channel, as I would very much appreciate it.
All these admittedly beautiful K-pop idols also looked totally different naturally, but then as they pursued fame, they also began to transform their looks into the coveted K-pop look that is so famous today. So what the happened? That, my friends, would be plastic surgery.
Essentially what happens here is a part of the K-pop group, they have what they deem to be a visual person, which is someone they deem to be like the best looking, as the kind of the leader of that group to an extent. Oftentimes to adopt that aesthetic that might be desired, individuals might go through rigorous plastic surgery, even from a young age, arguably even as children. And inherently the thing about plastic surgery and the kind of input I'm going to give there, it's your body, your choice. I'm not one to say what you can and can't do, what you should and shouldn't do. In this case I have an opinion, because then you're considering the idea of children who are going through life-changing surgery to alter their aesthetic to align with a standard that is just quite frankly not achievable naturally, or very rarely achievable naturally. Inherently, you've created something that is unlikely to be achieved, and have said to get there, to be relevant, to be somebody of popularity and somebody of worth in this culture, you must change your life. And essentially by doing so, you're changing your whole facial structure. When you're a child, you don't really know what you want. Going to be honest with you, when I was a child, I wanted to be a Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Master. I wanted my 3 Blue Eyes White Dragons to then create the Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, and even in my desk to my right, I have the 5 pieces of Exodia in case anyone wants to kind of throw down. Many years later, despite my desires and wishes in life not changing, but I do still want to pursue the Yu-Gi-Oh! Journey, I can fundamentally say that I'm probably not the same as everyone else. Other people, when they're children, they may want to be astronauts, they may want to be whatever they can be. You kind of start understanding yourself and kind of reinventing what you want to be and what you want to become. You make these decisions as children when you are probably going to change your mind in the coming years. Are you going to regret it? Probably. And then there's also the consideration of how much of this is forced by the parents, which is actually something we're going to talk about later on.
Plastic surgery is as common for teens in Korea as it is for teens getting their driving license in America. Apparently, gifting your children plastic surgery for graduating or as a gift is seen as quite normal.
I think it's key here to talk about the role of parents in this situation. And ultimately, again, I'm not a parent. I cannot speak for parents. I don't know. But what I do know is that there is a difference between nature versus nurture. And I think when you're kind of in I guess, encouraging and enabling this beauty standard, which inherently is potentially unhealthy and unrealistic, you are nurturing a behaviour that could have been avoided. Again, I get societal and cultural pressures, and again, I'm not saying this is only applicable to Asian cultures or K-pop. What I'm saying is that all cultures, to an extent, will experience this. Western cultures, as actually Stephanie does mention, are kind of big on the whole like Kardashian, BBL, that kind of side of things, whereas Asian cultures might obviously adopt a different approach. Neither, in my opinion, is morally correct when you're pushing a teenager or child to do so from potentially your desires, not theirs. For example, tattoos. I really like tattoos. There may be a time in my life that I might regret my tattoos, but I've wanted tattoos for countless years. Again, probably about 14 years before I even got a tattoo, I wanted tattoos. Therefore, it's safe to say I probably won't regret it. And I think the same kind of applies. If you really want something for a long period of time, you're less likely to regret it. But when this is being gifted to you by your parents, when you're younger especially, you're probably going to do what they think is best because you trust them. But if they're nurturing this bad behaviour, how much of this are you going to regret? And how how much of this is really negatively going to impact your life, which actually quite a few K-pop stars have then since come out and actually expressed the negative impacts of what they've been through. It is your duty as a parent, I believe anyway, to ensure that you are trying your best to enable and enforce healthy and sustainable habits and nurturing healthy and sustainable behaviors to your children to allow them to hopefully live as much of a happy, healthy, and to an extent balanced life as possible. When you're enforcing cultural standards or beauty standards and media standards that are ever changing, you're not helping address a potential issue here, you're actually just encouraging and enabling it.
Plastic surgery is very normal in South Korea, and the prospect of having surgery didn't bother me at all. I saw it as an investment in my future. The cost of the operation would have been added to my debt to the training company. She also goes on to say that it wasn't unusual for children to join the training company who had already undergone plastic surgery.
Firstly, the thing to note there is the fact that your mom's been told to invest in your future, invest in your career, and invest in particularly your worth as somebody within this industry. You must change who you are physically. I think is so damaging and toxic. Imagine going to school and being told, by the way, if you want to be successful and you want to be what you want to be, you're not good looking enough, you're too ugly, your face shape not for me, you're too fat, your legs not long enough. What you're born with, your kind of genetic structure, is wrong. And unless you're willing to change it and put yourself at great risk of problems, or maybe even death in some cases, you're nothing. You're worthless to us. We don't want you. It shouldn't be this way, but sadly it is. And I'm not purely blaming the industry on their own. What I am also saying is, as consumers, what is being done to enable this behavior, to allow the industry to kind of push this onto children, and what can consumers do to go against it to hopefully actually benefit the lives of those who are maybe exposed to this.
We weren't allowed to eat midnight snacks. Other snacks like chips and candy weren't allowed, so we would sneak out and eat it.
This is really relevant to kind of link to eating disorders and disordered eating. Once you demonize things and start labeling things as right, wrong, good or bad, you are very heavily pushing a very unhealthy and unsustainable relationship onto whatever you're demonizing. So potentially food. If you're saying, well, I can't eat this because it's bad for me. Why is it bad for you? Oh, because it's got too many calories in. So many things have loads of calories in. It's just how much of that are you consuming? I don't really believe in the label of good and bad, because how do you define good and bad food? Micronutrient density, macronutrient density, depending on the macro, like how is it defined? I think it's in moderation. And also when you kind of start adopting this good and bad mentality surrounding food, you will then likely, understandably, develop a lot of guilt if you were to eat that food. You then eat that food, you feel guilty, you then start depriving yourself of a food you might really enjoy. Then you start depriving yourself of calories elsewhere. Then before you know it, you're going down this really scary and dangerous rabbit hole of potentially eating disorders, and it's really hard to get out of that. No, it is not impossible, it's very doable and it's very achievable, but it's not easy. And again, when you look at eating disorders, a lot of people often see the physical impacts this have. You lost a lot of weight, whatever it may be. A lot of people overlook how much further this goes. The number of people with eating disorders who then essentially, unfortunately, take their own life, huge. The number of people with eating disorders who develop anxiety, depression and other mental health disorders due to the eating disorder or stemming from the eating disorder, huge. It is not just simply a disorder that is impacting your physical body with food, but also your emotional side of things. We're looking at anxiety and depression and so much beyond that.
The children would have weekly weigh-ins where the trainees' bodies would be analysed by the trainer, and the child's weight would then be announced to everyone else in the room.
You're then putting people subject to shame by basically saying this is how much you weigh. And obviously so many people inherently place a lot of value on themselves based on how much they weigh, the scale weight, the number. Again, sadly, I'm one of those people. I hold my hands up and say that's something I need to address, which I am working on. But once you start using it as a shaming point for people, how's that going to make them feel? If that's not going to be a massive trigger of scale anxiety, I don't know what is. And also you're then essentially dictating worth by body weight. I would be shocked to hear that people hadn't come out of the K-pop kind of realm with eating disorders that had already developed within that realm, even once they're beyond it. Because again, these are learned behaviours, and once you're being told something over and over again and learning this behaviour, that then essentially becomes your normal, your baseline. This is what you've learned, this is what you're going to be growing up or as you get older.
With some of the kids developing anorexia or bulimia, and because the female body needs a certain amount of body fat in order to balance hormones, lots of the girls lost their periods.
This is actually really common, actually with quite a few people I've worked with, a lot of my clients. A lot of people have this idea that, oh, fat makes you fat is bad for you, whatever it may be. Fundamentally, there are two macronutrients we need to survive. protein and fat. Once you get very lean, a lot of competitors may see this, like bikini competitors, bodybuilders, whatever it may be. They then often actually do lose their periods because, again, as Stephanie said, they don't have a sufficient level of body fat to then support regular and stable hormone function. That not only comes from body fat, but also the amount of fat they are consuming. If you're having 10 grams of fat a day, I guarantee your hormones are going to get absolutely battered. Again, that's when you then look at the difference, and you can actually apply this to K-pop to an extent, between performance and health. They often don't align. To perform as optimally as possible, be that at your sport, let's say bodybuilding, or at your career, we'll say being K-pop and this kind of music industry, you're probably going to have to give up health to get there. Is that something that's worth doing? I cannot answer. That's, again, this is subject to them, the bodybuilder, whoever it may be. It's on them. I can't say it's worth it for you or it's not worth it for you because I'm not you. Fat does not make you fat. Fat is very important for hormonal regulation and function, and ensuring that you have enough fat in your diet is pretty important. I personally like to kind of put, for women especially, depending, this is just like a blanket number with many factors to consider, I don't really often like going below 50 grams of fat per day. I may consider going down to 40, 45, within reason and subject to consideration of other variables, but I do typically favour around 50 plus if possible. Again, based on no evidence, just anecdotal evidence of what I've seen, how their cycle and their hormones might respond to going lower than that. The only issue with fat that people often face is that it is the most calorie dense macronutrient. 1 gram of protein and carbs both have 4 calories. 1 gram of fat has over double that, being 9 calories. Just because it's more calorie dense doesn't mean you should avoid it. Everything in moderation, and everything has a role to play.
Although they will get the fame and the adoration of so many fans, at what cost? And who is looking after their health, both mentally and physically, of these K-pop stars?
Again, a very valid point there in the sense that health is often perceived as one thing, which is your physical health. It goes far beyond that. I think you can consider mental health, emotional health, social health, so many things. It's all well and good kind of battering these K-pop stars into their industry, but they need to be considered. They are people, they are humans. There will be repercussions to this even after they come out of that industry. And at the end of the day, if this is something they really want to pursue, you can't stop them. And I'm not here to say what's right and wrong, but I do think there's merit in just having someone there to overlook and make sure that they're doing so in the healthiest way possible. Not saying it is healthy, but trying to minimize the risks, we'll say, as much as possible, and also give them that support once they come out of it to hopefully reintegrate and develop healthier, more sustainable habits again. Because again, this applies not just to K-pop, but also to all beauty cultures, is that we all have issues and things that we're promoting that inherently aren't going to cause a lot of problems. Obviously, Western, we're looking at BBLs, things like that. Look at the risk of a BBL, the death rate behind a BBL, huge. Where the Asian cultures might be encouraging a thinner, more defined look, which again, the risk of eating disorders like anorexia, huge. So many things, malnutrition, massive. They all share a similar thing here, which is they're encouraging you to believe that what you are is not good enough. What you are born with, what you have, whatever it may be, is not enough, and you need to change physically to be worth something, when that's not true. In the industry, sure, for them it may be true for that industry, which is something I don't necessarily agree with. But as a human, as your worth as a person is not dictated by your appearance, and you shouldn't feel the need or pressure to change that appearance to align with the beauty standard that's probably going to change at some point, and also a beauty standard that do you really want to align with. Again, there's nothing wrong with how you look. There's nothing wrong with being bigger. There's nothing wrong with being smaller. You have a preference of how you want to look, and ultimately the person that really matters in this equation is going to be you and your happiness. You could chase a validation from so many different people. You're only going to end up feeling worse, and it's probably going to result in potentially a pretty negative outcome, despite how much you wish it wouldn't. Solid video from Stephanie. I haven't covered everything, but I've kind of tried to elaborate on her points and kind of give my own perspective. But genuinely, pretty good video. At the end of the day, these are just my opinions, and I'm not one to say what is right and wrong. I'm just sharing an opinion, and I'd love to hear yours in the comment section below. And also, if there's anything that I've mentioned throughout this video that you might be struggling with personally, please don't hesitate to reach out. My DMs on Instagram are always open. Just send me a message and let's have a chat. I may not be able to provide a solution or an answer, but I'll always try my best, and I'll always be just an ear to listen. Until the next one, thank you for tolerating me. Thank you for tolerating my waffle about many different beauty standards in many different cultures, it seems, and thank you for tolerating the video.